I'm Dr. Tamara Fackrell, and I am an attorney by day and someone who's passionate about helping people save their marriages by night. So I've been a divorce attorney for over 20 years. I've worked in the law arena with juvenile court and regular court, and I help mediate and negotiate cases so they don't have to go to trial. I've been involved with thousands of different divorces over the years. And after being in the profession for about 10 years, I decided that I could help more people if I got my PhD in marriage, family, human development, so that I could understand the research. And my life is really focused on kids. I have 6 kids of my own. I love kids. Me and my husband have been married for over 25 years. And so part of my passion in life is helping people strengthen their relationships, and then also just that focus on helping kids to have all the skills and all the tools that they can have to be successful in life. I'm going to talk today about adding joy to your marriage. And President Kimball said, love is like a flower, and like the body, it needs constant feeding. The mortal body would soon be emaciated and die if there were not frequent feedings. The tender flower would wither and die without food and water. And so love also cannot be expected to last forever unless it is continually fed with portions of love, the manifestation of esteem and admiration, the expressions of gratitude, and the consideration of unselfishness. I love this idea, and this is kind of the hook of the talk, is the fact that if your marriage is the number one most important relationship in earth and on eternity, that we should make a lifetime goal of trying to improve our marriage. And Jake and I have worked really hard on this goal. And our marriage today, it's going to be better in 10 years than it is today. We are going to continually to be proactive inside our marriage to make it grow. We're going to have that constant feeding like President Kimball talks about. So I'm going to give you a system today of how I teach people to make their marriage grow. So the first question is, what do you love about your marriage now? That's called the abundance cycle. What's working in your marriage, you want to figure it out and you want to stretch it. Maybe you guys like to have a lot of recreation. Me and my husband just picked up the game called pickleball, and we've been starting to do that, and spike ball and some different things. Or maybe yours is like, no, what I really need is love notes. Whatever it is, figure it out, communicate it, and stretch it. Like dough for bread, stretch it and make it bigger and roll it out. I love the quote, I married my best friend. He is the one I laugh with, love with, dream with, and love. And the idea of when we first get married, we have all these dreams and goals, and we want to be able to accomplish those, not all at once, but over time. So I like to think of marriage, an analogy I like to use is about a stream. So it's just like a stream that's going along. And if you don't do a lot of proactive measures in your marriage, the stream decides where your marriage is going. But if you're proactive, you're carving space. We're going to get over to that mountain. And then later we're going to go over to the beach, and we're carving space and we're creating and making our marriage grow. No matter where you're at in your marriage, there's always space for growth. And I think that that's what's so exciting. I want to start with a counter example. What makes marriage fail? As a divorce attorney, here's the top 8 reasons for divorce from a practitioner's perspective. And I took these 8 things and then I mediated, several cases. I mediate about almost every workday. And I mediated, and I kind of was like, am I still catching it? And I found that about 90% of divorces happen with the AAA half. I'm crazy about acronyms. Those of you that have listened to me before at Education Week know that. And so AAA half, it's addictions, which is drugs, alcohol, pornography, gaming. Adultery, obviously, is a big issue, causes divorce. Anger management and immaturity and conflict resolution, which can lead to abuse cycles. health or mental health issues, avoidance and lack of communication. Now that one's interesting because Smart Marriages, which is the coalition in the United States regarding marriage, says that 90% of the divorces have a lack of communication or avoidance as a repeated pattern inside of it. And another really big one that leads to some of the other things as well is lack of regular intimacy. In the divorce structure and process itself, people divorce emotionally, and then from that emotional distance, then they create a physical divorce, which is where we're not having regular intimacy anymore, and then they move into the actual divorce process. So it's something I always have my eye on as I'm talking with people about good marriage practices. Faith crises is another reason why people divorce, and then finances. And so today we're going to talk a lot about things that wrap around a protection and a shield against those things that mainly cause divorces. So here's that weird and interesting logic. 90% of married individuals report being happy in marriage. 90%. But yet 50% are divorcing, and you're just thinking to me, Tamara, like, how is that possible? It's because people tend to divorce when they get into their lows of life and stress of life. You get all of these negative things occurring, and that negative spillover occurs. And then John Gottman's research shows that you look back in time and you string together all of the negative and all of the villain story, and then you make that story the reality of your marriage. So people divorce in low times, but in a study by the University of Chicago, which was by Dr. Waite, they basically did a longitudinal study for 5 years, and she found that, the 10% that were unhappy, with the over a 5-year period, 77% of those people who stayed married became happy again. And so what the research shows is marriage itself is the protection for happiness. Now, those in the study that ended up divorcing, their happiness didn't really increase. It stayed the same in that kind of unhappiness, most of them. And so, the thought is, if you're divorcing to try to make yourself happy, it's not the right method. Try to fix things inside the marriage itself. And now here's another interesting thing. 72% of unhappily married spouses are married to happy spouses. So it's like, man, your spouse is happy. And so what I like to tell people is you have to be a whole person. That's what makes a good marriage. When me and another divorce attorney mediator were talking about it, like, what is it that makes good marriages? We decided that a whole happy person that's independently happy in their life, that is what makes the best marriage partner. So that's kind of what we have our eye on inside our marriages, is how to know how to make ourselves happy. 50% of married individuals have thought about divorce. It's a really common thing that comes into our minds, so you don't have to be afraid if that thought just whisks through. Now, 80% of our thought patterns are naturally negative, according to the studies. And so it means that that's where Satan has that idea that he can tempt you, but all the thoughts you think about your marriage aren't your own. It's not till you pull it down and really sit on it and think about it long that it's your own thought. So as thoughts come in and out of your mind, be careful about them and just filter them out as we go through, and we'll talk more about that as we go through. And 94% of Bill Doherty's data is saying that married people who have troubles, they're glad they stayed married. So for the majority of people, marriage is the happy space. Working through hard times with your spouse pays off big. Happiness today, this is just such exciting news. Happiness today you have the greatest potential in marriage for happiness than in any other time. So the researcher Eli Finkel out of the Northwestern University, he says Americans today have elevated their expectations of marriage and can in fact achieve an unprecedentedly high level of marital quality if they put in a lot of effort. And so it's really exciting. But his research also shows that marriages are worse today and better. So there's kind of this big divide and this gap that they can be the best if you put a lot of work into it. And I think that one of the reasons in today's world why we're able to have so much more marital satisfaction is we have research and internet. We have more access to travel, more access for goals, more access for women to fulfill their potential and different opportunities that they have. And so it leads to a lot of great success. And I'm going to give you a formula today where you can look through and do that hard work in marriage. Some people will say to me, "Oh, you know what? My marriage is good. I don't need any marital education or any help." And I'm like, okay, that's just a sign to me that you don't get the bigger picture. You don't get the picture that marriage is lifelong. It's proactive. It's constantly getting better as you work through. And I love this quote by President Nelson. He said, "Marriage brings greater possibilities for happiness than does any other human relationship. Yet some married couples fall short of their full potential. They let their romance become rusty. They take each other for granted. They allow other interests or clouds of neglect to obscure the vision of what their marriage really could be. Marriages would be happier if nurtured more carefully." And then the quote by President Kimball, I love this one. "Marriage can be more an exultant ecstasy than the human mind can conceive. This is within the reach of every couple, every person." It's so exciting. And I thought, okay, how can we have this exultant ecstasy that President Kimball talks about? How can we make it so that our romance doesn't become rusty? And it's that purposeful action. And I'll tell you, I've done the work in my marriage, and it wasn't easy. And the reason why is because Jake and I are really different. We are an opposites attract marriage. Now, some of you are the birds of the feather flock together marriage, so you don't have to build as many bridges. I had to do a lot of work, Jake and I, to build bridges. Like, nope, he's logic-based, I'm emotion-based. He's a talker, I'm a listener. Like every cue that I go through and test, it's like, man, we have a lot of differences. We have a lot of bridges to build, so it's a lot of work for us, but it gives a lot of breadth once you get the formulas figured out. And that's what's so exciting, is that you don't have to coexist on a level that isn't satisfying, that you can build bridges and systems once you understand the differences, and it makes life really easy and exciting. And so one of the models we're going to talk today is the RAFT model, and that is that I am 100% responsible for how I act, feel, and think. And remember, your thinking comes first. And remember, people have 12 to 60,000 thoughts a day. Like, that's just craziness. And some of you grab and you move from the thinking to the feeling, and then from feeling to actions. So learning to either slow down your thinking and feeling so that you have space between actions, because you talk without thinking, or you didn't mean to say it, but you did. That's where you need to slow down. And some people on the opposite end of the spectrum, like myself, I needed to learn how to speak up. When I was first married and a young bride, it's like I had all these thinking and feelings, and Jake couldn't read my mind, and I was giving him all these secret tests, like, if he really loves me, he'll turn around right now and say, "I love you." And he didn't. He failed all my secret tests. I needed to learn how to speak up. And so one day I was sitting in Professor Gerald Williams' negotiation class at the law school, and he was talking about all these concepts, and I just realized, wow, I need to use these concepts in my marriage. So I went home and I just told Jake, hey, I want roses, fire and ice from the discount club, because I don't want you to pay full price, my frugalness that comes out so often. And don't buy a vase because we already have one. And within the week, I had the flowers that I asked for. And I was like, wow, that was easy. And I kept trying again and again. And I started the thinking and the feeling. I started to come up with actions and things Jake could do to satisfy me. And I realized by opening up and allowing him to satisfy me, instead of me always just trying to satisfy him, made our marriage beautiful. And it's something that I've continued to work on and gotten really good at after 25 years of practice of being married to him. And so John Gottman talks about this kind of secret sauce of marriage. So it's a ratio of 5 to 1. So for every one negative that there is, you have to have 5 positives in order to balance them out. Now in the happiness research itself, they say the ratio is 3 to 1, but in relationships of marriage, 5 to 1. So I wanted to kind of show you that difference. So what that means is if you're going to have like a hash session and you're going to talk about everything bad in your marriage, that might not work as well as a strategy where you talk about the one most important thing and then you get that one thing solved and then you flood yourself with 5 more than that, other awesome opportunities of connection and recreation and dating and romance and intimacy and all the things that builds your marriage up as you've solved one. And then maybe the next week you take the next most important thing and solve one. So instead of solving them all, let's just say you go to a therapist and you talk about 100 things that are wrong or 20 things that are wrong. You can't bring enough positivity in to make it work. And with the couples in distress that I work with where they're trying to do a reconciliation mediation to stay together, I mainly do divorce mediation, but I do some reconciliation mediations. What I found is that people have turned off their happiness faucets. And so we're going to tightly control money so we can't spend anything, and I'm not going to go out with my friends anymore. Like all of the faucets that made them that happy whole person, they've turned off. And they've put everything onto their marriage and depended too much on it and it's broken. And so you want to keep those faucets on, those faucets of happiness, to keep that ratio of 5-1. So I speak all the time because part of getting my PhD was to help the world to be able to know good principles in marriage and family. And so when I went and speak, I would do a qualitative data where I would just ask people, what makes your marriage great? Then I would collect all the data and then I would put it into these different categories. And mainly this is where this MERCIES comes from my own little qualitative private research that I did. And so these are the things where people reported, hey, this is what's making my marriage happy. And then if you get into other research, you'll see that these things are also backed up. So we're going to talk about that. It's the MERCIES. So it's marital virtues, emotional needs, recreation and dating, conflict resolution, intimacy and affection, exchange of communication, self-reliance and self-control, and then spiritual components. And as we talk about these different things, you want to kind of, as we're going through each one, rate yourself in your marriage. How are you doing in this category on a scale from 0 to 10? And see where you're doing great and expand those in the abundance cycle. And the ones where you're not doing so good, set some goals in a proactive way with your spouse and work through and see what you can do. But there's lots to work on your marriage through a lifetime and lots of proactive measures we can do to make our marriage better. We're going to start with marital virtues. And really, Blaine Fowers, he's kind of the researcher that went into marital virtues, and his research showed that having marital virtues or being a good person or developing Christ-like attributes is more important than effective communication in marriage. So it doesn't mean that communication isn't important, but developing yourself and your person is, in his research, it showed the most important. So friendship, loyalty, generosity, justice, and courage. Those were the 5 most important marital virtues according to his research. And then when I gathered the data from people, there was all sorts of things that they talked about being loyal and faithful and so there's things that the marital virtues, and you can decide in your marriage which ones you want to develop. And it's part of Jake and my vision statement on what we're developing as a couple, what's important to us, and how the 1 + 1 can equal 3 as we focus in on those Christ-like attributes that we're trying to develop. You can send a gratitude text to your spouse often. I encourage writing love letters, share exciting news, and then learn to be the first responder for your spouse. When you are with your spouse and they're needing or having a problem or support, you want to ask them, do you need closeness Or do you need space? And if you need space, how long it is? What does closeness look like? Do you want to snuggle? Like, what can I do to help you? Figure out a coping method where you can be involved in it in a way that makes sense for your spouse. So you want to help them develop it, and then share what works for you. And being fiercely loyal, I think, is one of the most important parts. When we talk about addictions and adulteries on the AAA half, having loyalty rules inside of marriage is something I think is important. And when I do education for newlyweds, I tell them, hey, we need to have some fidelity rules because it's hard to shift from being single into being married. So, you're not going to be alone with people of the opposite sex. If you are, you're going to make sure that you share that with your spouse or let them know of situations that come up. And then it's not just about our actions. It's also about our thinking and our feeling. So monitoring how we're thinking and feeling about other people, monitoring what we're watching and how we're integrating it, and monitoring your contact with other people. I'm also a fan of if there's someone that you've had a really close relationship with and loved and kissed and did, and had a connection with, for you to not have them as social media friends. We call that the social media divorce. We do several of those in our office every month because you can so quickly get an attachment with someone who you've already been attached to. So just setting up rules inside your marriage that works great for you, I think is something that's really important there. Now, when we move to the E, the emotional, this is where we really want you to take control of your own happiness. Be your own happy person and spill that happiness, it's called positive spillover, into your love. Spread the love of your marriage. Take control of your own emotions and make a happy list. So and I put in, when I work with couples, I put a center in the middle of the paper. And I say, okay, here's your marriage. Now, what streams happiness into your marriage? And we identify 10 and 15 things. And as I continue to work with them, it gets bigger. The wheel gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then we do another one for husband, another one for wife. What are your streams of happiness, and tapping into those and not letting yourself tap out on things that aren't important. Controlling your negative emotions, focusing your life on your abundance cycle. And then here's a really big one, especially for myself. Like, I had to get rid of things that were stressful and unnecessary in my life. And I've even had times in my life where some of my kids were struggling, and I'm like, you know what? I've got to move away from that. I even stopped teaching at the law school, which I loved doing. I taught there part-time, but I had to stop it. And one of the reasons is that some of my kids were struggling and I was spread too thin. So I had to give up something that I loved for my family and my kids, and it was worth it. Now I'm down the road and I'm looking back, and it was worth it. And I still have opportunities to teach, like right here, right now. This is a dream come true. And so I think that when you make those big sacrifices, God compensates you on the back end, because making sacrifices for your marriage and your kids is worth it. And so another thing that you can do is to monitor your self-talk. Monitor your self-talk about how you're feeling about yourself, and then also monitoring your self-talk about what you're telling yourself about your marriage. I'm happy and I love myself. I'm a good person and I love myself is my little affirmation. But people developing an affirmation that they say over and over to themselves can be a really great life skill. And so as we talk about this, a lot of research shows that how you tell yourself your marriage story, you are the author of your marriage story. How you tell it is really important. And so do you tell the villain story? And when people divorce, they string together all the bad and they tell themselves that villain story. And John Gottman says that the storytelling itself is what really shifts things. And then also, do you tell yourself the hero story? Now, let's be candid here. Every marriage has bad times. If you want to string the 10 worst things that happened in your marriage, everybody has that villain story. So be careful. Instead of that, string pearls together. Go and think about being in Hawaii, diving, getting the pearl, opening it up, this great memory that you have, and string it together. Research also shows, John Gottman again, that the soft startup, if you start an issue soft, it usually will end in a soft way. So remember with your memories, if something in the middle just kind of get muddles, and now we move over to the happiness literature, it says, hey, if you end on a good note, that's the most important in that memory. So ending on a good note is something that you want to, even if you kind of muddle it up in the middle, that's okay. Because we want to be purposeful in our marriages, but we're not perfect. We're not perfect people, and so we mess up sometimes. And that's where we're going to talk a little bit more of just kind of getting to that heart of forgiveness that can happen inside of marriage as well. So I did another little informal study asking husbands, hey, what can make a man happy in marriage? Now, most of them said, you mean besides the obvious, and obviously they're talking about intimacy. But yeah, so we kind of went through and developed it. So at the core, like men at the bottom of that Maslow triangle, just making sure they have plenty of intimacy, food, sleep, that is kind of at the core. And then women, make yourself happy. Figure out what you need to be happy and do those things proactively. So a lot of men are like, yeah, if I have that basis and my wife can stay happy and automate happiness, I'm good. But a lot of men also told me that they like to be adored. They want their wife. It's their only woman. It's the only person in their life that they love that way. They want to be desired and wanted, have passion in their marriage. Like it's exciting to know that your wife really wants you. So just changing your mindset that intimacy is something that's great in your marriage and that you enjoy it and love it and you desire your spouse. All of those things can bring a lot of happiness. And so we might as well change our mindset because we are in control of our affection and intimacy and what we think about that and how we feel about it. So changing your mindset and putting it in a positive way. So my husband, we were high school sweethearts and he went on a mission. And when he was gone, he told me, hey, Tam, I need you to learn to like beans because he loved beans. I hated beans. I just thought they were gritty. I didn't like them. So when he was away on his mission, I would like take pictures learning to like beans, like eating burritos. Now, like literally we have beans at least once a week. And it's a mind shift or a mindset that I changed because that was something important to Jake. And I was able to attach and change my thinking on it, just like he goes to the theater with me. So we've done some melding on things that are really important to one another. And another thing that has been said, just planning recreation. Instead of watching it on the side, being a person that enjoys the recreation with your spouse instead of being a spectator. Acknowledging his role to provide and preside and protect. Loving that perfect imperfections. And don't be a complainer. Don't complain about things. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. And of course, men are like, yeah, like don't let yourselves go as a woman. It is interesting when people divorce, how they start to take care of their self in a different way because they're on the market. It's like we always want to take care of ourselves for ourselves and our happiness and also for our spouse. Now, another thing is just this nagging, which I call no good aggravating grief. Now, the reason that wives nag is because husbands don't do what we're asking. But remember, they're not our child. They don't have to obey what we do. And so it's something to think about that timing is everything. We're a team and we want to get the team people functioning. So timing is everything. So when I ask Jake to do something on my honey-do list, then it's going to be, hey, the night before, hey, tomorrow's our Saturday chores, because we have a designated time where we do a lot of honey-dos because of our Saturday's chore rhythm in our family. And so even on the Sunday before, when we're having our couples powwow, we might bring up, hey, we're going to be doing this weekend. But timing is everything. People will say, well, I asked, but he wouldn't. It's like, wait a second. Like, you need to ask again and again on a time when it's actually available, when we can actually do it. So plan ahead, give options, make a list, and, hire it out if you can, because no task is more important than your marital relationship. So if a task is causing a lot of conflict, just let the task go. It's not worth it. You can do it yourself. I even have a pink toolbox myself. I try to be handy-mandy at times, and I even have found that a high heel shoe in my closet can put up a nail. So there's a lot of different ways. Like, I use tools clearly that my husband doesn't use. But hey, I can still get the job done too. And then, of course, with we want to compliment them and catch them inside their good acts. And so if they're doing it, make sure to use appreciation and compliments to reinforce that behavior. Positive reinforcement, it's called in the literature. So believe it or not, people feel like wives are so difficult to figure out. I can't figure out my wife. But really, when I talk to wives about things, it's pretty simple. So kind words, soft touch. Basically, you have to treat them like you did when you were courting them and you were dating them and you were romancing them. Say, I love you. And I asked Jake, like, do I need to break it down for guys? Like, what kind words means? He's like, absolutely. So 2 parts, compliments and appreciation. And then, of course, flirting. So that would be a third. So complimenting them often. Like if you get your hair all curled up, say, wow, you look pretty. You know, don't just say pretty. Say, you look beautiful. You look stunning. You look amazing. Like, use really good adjectives. Don't say you look cute. Like, use really good adjectives if you can. Appreciate the things that your spouse does. If you were living alone, you'd have to do your own laundry, your own dishes, all of those things. So if your spouse contributes to those in a way, make sure that you're appreciating them often, just like you would in other settings. And then flirting, but flirting in a way like you did before you were married. Writing love notes. Jake and I had a beautiful courtship. We were young and Twitter-pated about each other, and he would leave notes on in my car, and we would do all sorts of creative things for one another, kind of keeping that liveliness up. And then soft touch that's non-sexual. Once it becomes sexual touching, you've blown it. And so it doesn't mean you can't touch sexually, because of course you can. But I usually would say, hey, if your wife touches you sexually, then you can touch her back. But otherwise, just keep it to soft touch that's non-sexual and figure out what she likes. Holding hands, stroking her hair, touching her arm with no strings attached. One thing that women say is the only time they touch me is when they want sex. And it shouldn't be like that. It should be the fact that the flirting and the foreplay happens way early and we're doing a lot of non-sexual touching, and that your wife can trust that you're going to have a lot of non-sexual touching except for when you're in the other mode. And so that's how I would really just to tell the guys, hey, kind word, soft touch, kind word, soft touch. And I do have one more little help for you. There was a study based, and one thing came out of it, and it's doing the work. Yes, housework. It also said that husbands doing housework is something that brought a lot of joy. So you want to, obviously, these are generalities, and you want to do specifics that work for your marriage. But Megan McLean's my best friend. Her dad, Michael McLean, is an amazing songwriter who I love. And so he writes all these songs, and Lynn's like, Michael, I don't want you to write another song for me. Get the vacuum. So I called Michael to get a quote, and he said, the sexiest thing a man can do for his wife, vacuuming. And if you want to really impress her, do it without being asked. And it doesn't have to be vacuuming. You have to have an inside chore, outsides don't count, an inside chore that you are so good at. If you are the dish man, or you're the laundry man, or you're the vacuumer, whatever it is, that's something, and that rhythm can help make women happy. I want to talk more about emotional and just raising your emotional IQ. The studies show that men having more emotional IQ is what helps wives the most. And John Gottman, of course, he's the famous marriage researcher in the United States. He tells men, hey, do you want to know how to make your wife happy? The same thing I said. Hold her. Hold her when she's sad. Hold her when she's happy. Hold her before intimacy, after intimacy. Hold her, hold her, hold her. That's his idea. So you want to see if that would work for your spouse. Maybe your wife's like, nope, I'm a space person. I don't want to be held. So you want to check in. But that's one way to raise the emotional IQ, and recognizing differences. So people that are logic-based versus emotion-based, figure out what you are, figure out what your spouse is. Logic-based people have 5 emotions: mad, glad, sad, fear, disgust. That's it. I'm mad, I'm sad, I'm glad, like simple. But then there's emotion-based people. I'm emotion-based, Jake's logic-based. Of course, we're opposite on almost every cue you can imagine, which is why I've had to work so hard to have a great marriage. But the work pays off. That's what I'm trying to teach you today. And so, but the people that are emotion-based like myself, we have more like 55 emotions. And it's really not 55. It's just a number for a very large amount of emotions because I'm elated, I'm joyful, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I'm moping. There's all of these different words that I use. And so for emotional intelligence, the most simple way to teach it, and I even teach this to kids, is when someone says a feeling word, repeat it back exactly. Don't change that you're frustrated into angry or don't depressed, don't call that sad. Use the exact word. So, of course, I've trained all my kids that are married. I've got 3 married kids now, and I've got 2 at home and 1 on a mission. And I've trained my kids, hey, these are the principles you need to know. And so my son-in-law, my daughter finishes talking about something, and at the end he was like, yeah, you said one of those 55 emotions, but I don't remember what it is. I just thought it was so cute. The fact that he's trying to grab that emotion, but didn't quite, but at least we have a language to talk about it and you can recognize that that's important. So when you talk about empathy and validation, one of the easiest things to do is to grab that emotion word and say, wow, you feel really sad, you feel depressed, whatever that word is, and just repeat it back. But when they have a break. So you let them talk, and what we say, empty the pitcher. Let them get all the words out, empty the pitcher. And even if you take your phone out and say, you know what, I'm going to take notes. Because that's how you can listen well and write down those emotion words and then summarize back in 2 to 3 sentences or more. Don't summarize short. And then move it forward. Now, I tell people that if your spouse wants closeness, okay, instead of space, when they withdraw and you're fighting it out, because look, all couples fight, let's be honest. But good couples, we fight better. So I'm going to teach you how to fight better today because everybody has issues. Everybody does. And we just need a way to resolve things. And it can be really simple if you make it systematic. So if your spouse needs closeness, then when she withdraws, it's a dare to hug her or him. And so this was actually cute, made up by one of my cute friends. She's like, hey, I told my husband, hey, when I'm having my space, it's a dare for you to hug me. And he's like, wait, really? Because that's what we call an opposite cue. I teach it to kids an opposite talk. What they're doing is exactly opposite of what they really need. And I've even heard of a good friend where, he ended up divorcing. Why? Because his wife said, leave me alone. But what she really meant is come close to me and show me that you care and give everything. And so there's all of these opposite cues that can be confusing. And that's why the emotion-based is so confusing. And I always use this little analogy of the logic-based person sitting on the ground holding the kite string and the emotion-based person in the air flying around. And it's nice to be emotion-based because you have the highs and the lows and it's exciting that way. But it's nice to be logic-based, just that steady. So I tell people, enjoy the steadiness of the logic-based love. Like, he loves you. And it's not going to change. Where one day I wrote in my journal in the morning, I love Jake so much. He's so amazing, and he is. And then I'm like, I'm just writing this for another time that I might need it. By that evening, I needed to refer back because I had shifted and changed already. So I try to be now more steady with my emotion and more careful inside and more self-aware of my thoughts. And I don't just let any crazy thought that comes in my mind be my own. I'm like, nope, that's not my thought. So controlling thinking can be, or what we call a mindful marriage, can be something that's really important. And then I want to give you a little lesson on reading body language. I am going to help you get some nonverbal glasses. So here it is. So let's just say you are fluent in every language on the planet. And so if someone speaks to you in French, you're going to speak French. And if someone speaks English, English. Spanish, Spanish. If someone speaks to you in words, you're going to speak words. And if someone speaks to you non-verbally, how are you going to speak back? That's right, non-verbally. So the lesson to help people when they're in their soothing mode, when your spouse is in soothing mode, sitting there, just what they're doing is in their mind, they're in their RAFT model, and they're trying to say things in their mind to get them soothed, and they're working through it in their mind. What should you do? Well, what a lot of people do they shouldn't do. They leave them alone, or they say, what's wrong? Those are the two things you don't want to do. What you do want to do is respond back with body language. So ask. And when I'm helping couples develop this system, it's like, well, what touch is appropriate? What would you want him to do? Some people are like, I want him to scratch my back. I want him to hold my hand. I want him just to touch my arm, or whatever it is. But you can respond back with body language, just a soft touch, and to let him know, I get it. I'm not going to say anything, but I am going to give you a soft touch. And then you could say something, can I do anything for you? Or if you did something wrong, take responsibility for your part. Now, some people feel like the words I'm sorry mean I'm wrong. Whereas people that are emotion-based, when you say I'm sorry, it means I care. So you want to say I'm sorry, meaning I care. I'm sorry I offended you. I'm sorry that it went this way. I'm sorry that that this is happening. Don't say, I'm sorry that you are being so, no. Keep it to I statements. I'm sorry I offended you. If you want to talk, I'm here for you. And so here's where we get into the idea just of conflict resolution, of having a box. So people have boxes in conflict resolution, and an open box means things can get in there and it's still active. Well, we want you to close the box. So if you go into a self-soothing mode, you need to circle back with your spouse when you're done and say, hey, I'm good, if you're good. Or, hey, I just want to talk to you about this one item. Get the box closed. Having a lot of open boxes of conflict in marriage can make your marital satisfaction decrease. And we don't want that. We want you to close the box. And we're going to talk more about that as we go through. Let them process, give them space if they want it. If they don't want space, then cuddle them, do whatever they want. But develop this soothing system when they're not in soothing mode. Develop it in your Sunday powwow with your spouse to figure out what works best. But when in doubt, respond first with soft body language. Okay. Now to recreation and dating, just kind of that heart of love. This is how you start courting, is through doing wholesome recreational items together. And the family proclamation is clear that wholesome recreation is something that should be part of our families for a lifetime. So I recommend that people plan a date weekly, and you want to find out here. Are you a planner or are you spontaneous? Actually, Jake and I match on one cue, and that is that we both have a spontaneous flair to us. So that's one of our matching cues that I love because it's one of the very few that we match on. And so with the weekly date, I recommend, hey, on Sunday, saying, hey, who's going to do the date this week? Is it me or you? But planning something, and then even if your spouse is a planner, here's the trick. Make sure she knows what shoes she's going to wear. If they know what shoes they're going to wear, then they can kind of mentally plan ahead that way. I also think you should plan a quarterly major date. And I'm a big fan of people getting lifetime marital education. Jake and I went to the John Gottman seminar that came into our town this last year. It was something that I loved, and it was something that gave me more great ideas to help our marriage. You could do another major date. Maybe there's a concert coming in town. Maybe it's a hike. It doesn't matter what it is, but get something on the books that you're looking forward to. And then the secret sauce to my marriage is actually a brilliant idea of my husband's. So he's a CEO of a company, and in his model of what he uses for his company, they do quarterly retreats so that they can work on their business. And so the idea is don't work just in your marriage, work on your marriage. And so with his great idea, we started to do an overnight, which is 24 hours, quarterly retreat. And in that, we do a marriage checkup. Now, the studies show that only 1 in 4 people can accurately predict the marital satisfaction of their spouse. And in the seminars that I teach, sometimes it gets to be so sad because it's like, man, one spouse thought their marriage was awesome, but really the other spouse doesn't think their marriage is good at all. And so making sure that we're communicating about gaps. And so Jake and I like to do a marriage checkup often. We have a sheet that we follow. How are we doing? Can we get to that everyday 10 out of 10? What's our formula to make our marriage great? So talking about things, developing. So on overnighter, we will do a marriage checkup to see how we're doing on our marriage. And then we do it on a scale from 0 to 10. And then we do 10 things that are going well. And I'm very purposeful in what I say. I don't just say random things. I'm going to show you at the end of my presentation what I share with Jake in my retreats. It's kind of a personal thing, but I just want to give you as many examples as possible. And I'm going to give you a fire hydrant of examples because as a divorce attorney, I sometimes see couples and I just think, oh, if they would have just had information sooner, if they would have just done more to speak up and to not harbor and have the RAFT and not harbor those negative feelings, if they would have done a marriage checkup, just like your car needs oil. It's like if I could have spoken to them and given them an idea and they were prompted to write it down and started on it, that is the joy that I get. And that is why I spent the time to get my PhD, so I could help people not come to my divorce office. That is my goal, that the whole world would be able to have happy marriages. That would be ideal. And so we're doing a marriage checkup. Just like any business needs a checkup, just like it's the same system and rhythm of a business. And that's what Jake taught me. And that's what he brought to our marriage, which I loved. And so 10 things that are going well, and I track it. And then 2 things that you want your spouse to work on. Proactive things they can be. And hey, here's 2 things I want you to do, Jake. And hey, here's 2 things you want me to do. And then I have those 2 things that I'm working on for the quarter, and Jake has his 2 things. And, we're writing it down on our mirror and we're checking it out on our phone to see what we're working on. And yeah, I went back and did a little meta-analysis, the researcher in me, on hey, here's all the things that we have told each other to do. How are we doing? What are the themes to those? So it's fun because you record it and then you can kind of see how you're working through and how you're improving. And then Jake and I actually like to do a honeymoon once a year. So one of our checkups is a honeymoon. And these aren't hard. Like the checkup's easy because we do one for my birthday, one for Jake's birthday, one for an anniversary, and one at one other time. And it doesn't fall exactly tightly into the quarter model, but it's what works good for us because we're celebrating anyway. And during these quarterly retreats, you want to obviously have a lot of recreation plan, a ton of good intimacy. We're talking and communicating. We're doing a little bit of conflict resolution, and we're serving one another. And so all of these things combined can just make it wonderful and great. So I want to move into conflict resolution, and I just want to simply teach you 2 models. One is the share model, and the other one is the solve model. So as I kind of mentioned, is people have a lot of marital garbage. It means that you have past wrongs and resentments and past conflicts that you're bringing into the present. So you don't have, your marriage isn't tidy. You can see the marriage street here and their marital map. They've got a lot to clean up and they haven't done so. If you're allowing you to go back into the raft of all the wrong things and you're stringing all of those negative things together, that's not going to make for a healthy marriage. Elder Holland's the one that says to us to let the past go. Don't live in it. And I love that talk that he gives on Remember Lot's Wife that talks about moving past the past. It's just so beautiful, that ideas, and that's what makes a good marriage as well. And so trying to get rid of the marital garbage and closing the box on past conflict and then controlling your wrath so you don't keep going back there. I work with many marriages in crisis, and hard things happen in marriage. And maybe your marriage is your trial of your life. That's your trial. Everybody has their trials in their lives. My sister died when I was younger, and that was a big trial for me. Everybody has their trial. But God has given you all of the things that you need to get through the trials he's given you. He's given you all of those things to get through. And if your marriage is your trial in your life, honor it. Just like I had to honor and come to a space with my sister's death and my nephew's death. And so as we're trying to get through the marital garbage, or if you're a emotion-based person, having the share model is a really good method. So you talk and the other person listens. So first you have to say, are you in share or solve? Hey, I'm in share. Oh, good to know. So you don't want me to solve anything. Nope, I don't want you to solve. So I just need you to listen. So I say it. And then Jake summarizes with 2 sentences. He repeats back my emotion words. That's validation in a one-sentence way to do it. So simple. And then ask a depth question. Well, how long have you been feeling this way? Who, what, where, when, why, how? Ask a question that shows you're getting it. And then respecting differences. We don't have to be the same to have a great marriage. We can build bridges over our differences. And then an event of caring after. And so let's have a snuggle. Let's have intimacy. Give me a kiss. Give me an 8-second hug. Whatever you need. And develop a system that really works for you. And so other times you're in solve mode. And when I'm in solve mode, Jake's like, yay, because he wants to solve. He's a solver. And the reason that solvers bring up problems is for solutions. But the reason that sharers bring up problems is because sharing events in life builds relationship and closeness. And so because we have differences in the way that we want to share, as long as Jake knows in a logic-based way, hey, I'm sharing with you things about our marriage and our day and things that are going good, bad, because that's what builds relationship for me. I'm talking-based, where he's a solver. He brings up problems for me to solve, and he's activity-based. So doing activities builds relationship for Jake, whereas talking builds relationship for me. So, of course, it's an opposite cue that we had. So we had to build a bridge. People will tell me, Tamara, I've already brought it up with my spouse. We can't do it. But the question that I always ask you is, did you ask and did you try to solve the problem with a pencil in your hand? Because if you have a really mindful marriage, you're going to have a pencil in your hand. That means you haven't brought it up in an abrupt way and you're talking and you're in your limbic system and you've got your reptile monster thinking out. No, it means that you had your smart brain on, you sat down and you're in your prefrontal cortex, you're writing it down, which switches you into the left logic brain. You're trying to figure out solutions and you're using the ABCDE method. This is the extended ABCDE method, the double ABCDE that I teach. And so it's actively listen and ask questions to make sure you understand. So that's kind of the share model right there. And then you move into the solve part of it. So let's just say you shared, but you needed to solve. You're like, wait a second, I need to move into solve. Then you just move into the B. So you brainstorm the agenda. What are we going to work on? Or what are the items we need to resolve? You brainstorm solutions and figure out what you're going to do. Then you can combine options. You choose the solution. You develop the details. And then you do the work, you do the plan. Sometimes the plans don't go like we thought. And so you want to examine the past, examine the future, and be better next time. We're always growing and changing inside of our marriages. And so I like to implement what we call the 24-hour rules. And this is basically because we're trying to deal with problems as they come, that we are going to try to engage within 24 hours. And I needed this rule when I first got married. It was actually developed by my brother, and his wife would bring things up like 3 months ago. He's like, wait, what? So it's a really important thing to have a time frame. Hey, I'm going to bring up problems within 24 hours. So my classic 24-hour story is that I'm camping with my husband. We have 5 boys, lots of crazy dirt and, so I'm camping with 5 kids at the time, not 6 yet. And I look, and I guess I'm not really that great at putting away tents. And so it's like, I know Jake doesn't really like me to help with the tent, but because, I'm a pleaser, of course I want to help. I didn't know at that time that not helping was the best thing I could do. I was like, oh, why didn't someone tell me that earlier? I'm telling you, if you're a person that's a people pleaser, not helping is sometimes the best thing you can do if they want it specific, because then you put in the negative relationship into the task and you get your feelings hurt and it's just a mess. So just don't help with some things. So he was doing the tent, and at this time I didn't know I shouldn't help. So I went over, can I help you? And he's like, yeah, you can put the poles in the tent bag. I'm like, the poles? Like, seriously? So I put the poles in the tent bag. I look over, my little toddler is crying and into something. I gotta run over, grab the toddler, dirt everywhere. I look back and I see Jake is taking the poles out of the bag and then put them back in a different way. I was like so enraged in my mind. I was like, I cannot believe I cannot even put poles in the bag the right way. We have got way too much to work on. So I was doing my little tantrum in my mind. And so we got into the car and I'm like, I got to bring it up. And I want to bring it up now because I don't want to have a 3-hour car drive like stewing over there. So I just said, Jake, I caught you. I saw you taking those tent poles out of the bag. And he said, well, how else was I supposed to get the steak bag out of the bottom? So here I had created what this big ghost conflict, it's called. This conflict that didn't really exist. Here I thought he was correcting me. He was taking the tent poles out of the bed because I did it wrong. But in fact, it was just the steak poles. So that's why you have to talk about things in your marriage so that your ideas that I had, my emotion-based ideas, didn't match what Jake had done. And guess what? Hey, he's a solver. He's a debater. So he's always up for a good debate. And so he might have forgotten because he processes conflict so quickly he doesn't remember. And so if I would have brought it up in 2 weeks, he would never remembered that. So bringing it up while you're in the moment helps you close the box. And if you're an over-engager and you talk about too much, wait 24 hours and see if it's still a big deal to you. So this literature with conflict resolution comes from Kenneth Cloak. I attended a conference that he spoke at, and he presented these 5 different levels. So the crisis mode is a past focus, crisis cleanup, past. Negotiating and cooperating, that's that present that I've been talking about. And then level 4 and 5 is what I want to talk about next, is building systems for the future and building vision for the future. So that's where a lot of exciting things can come. One day, one morning I woke up from a dream. And in the dream, a woman was in quicksand. And her husband was over trying to get her out of the quicksand, but it started to make him go in the quicksand too. And then I woke up and I took out my phone and I just started to record things. And I thought about it and I realized that some people live in the quicksand of their marriage. They live in the past. They live in the crisis. So even their everyday normal communication is overtaken by that negative conflict track. And so they don't have a normal communication track. Like they get triggered by the smallest things because they haven't closed the box. And so that level 3 is just negotiating and dancing on the quicksand. But level 4 and 5 is getting your wings to fly. So you don't even have to really be near the quicksand. And so it's exciting to be able to teach people how to do that. And you do that by developing systems. And again, this comes from Kenneth Cloak's research of developing systems for the future. So be a marriage fortune teller. You can develop systems in your marriage by studying your marriage. Do you know how you're going to fight in the future? Well, of course you do. Because guess what? It's perpetual. It comes again over and over again. Now, John Gottman says that 67% of perpetual conflict can't be solved. Why? Because it's about different personalities and lifestyles that won't be changing. And so that's why this is a system that actually can solve those things, because you honor differences and build bridges. And that's what's so exciting. So you learn from your past issues how we're going to deal with things in the future. So I'm going to just go over some types of system. The first is the meet in the middle system. This is where you compromise, where you both agree to live by a certain standard. For example, when you're angry, you will have ground rules. Every couple should have ground rules when they're angry. So each party agrees that we will not touch one another while we're angry, that we will honor either cave time or we will honor closeness that we need, and that we'll re-engage to have solutions. We're going to close the box. So those are things that can be really important. You can logicize, which I'm going to teach you to do in just a minute. You can have the agree to disagree. So Jake and I have a disagreement where we just have to agree but still hold hands. He likes to jump off, do backflips off of cliffs. I said, please don't do it. He's still doing it. And because I can't control him, that's a lifestyle choice that he loves to do. So we agree to disagree. I did make him get some more life insurance just in case. But it was funny because a friend the other day texted me a picture. Hey, I got a great place here in Canada for Jake to jump off cliffs, because everybody knows when I speak that this is my agree to disagree with Jake. A one-way system is where you do it the way of just one of the spouses. And so, for example, now I want to let you know that when you divorce, there's something called final say. So there's certain genres that people have, like I'm in charge of this genre, medical or school or religion, and I'm going to have final say. It's nice to work that same system out. And for myself and Jake, like if it's something about the garage, that's his final say area. And so we talk about things, but if we can't really come to a decision, that's his final say. And so that's why on his final say things, we're going to do it his way. And on my final say things, we're going to do it my way. And so, for example, he can be in charge of the garage. I don't even help him with the garage anymore. I've taken that out of my marriage. That's my do nothing space for Jake. He does chores with the boys in the garage instead of me, because I want to try to protect my marriage wherever I can from things that could spill over in a negative way. So, and then another one is the his-her system. That is something that you're familiar with, of course, because of the his-her bath towels. Now they have his-her air inside of cars. So, of course, mine's always hot and Jake's is always cooler. And so party one does their way, party two does their way. This is actually mine and Jake's. We had a big issue in our marriage about discipline. He was raised by Mr. Drill Sergeant Army, and I was raised by Mary Poppins. And when you mix those together into one household, it doesn't work out so well. And I was doing things I shouldn't have. I was interjecting into his parenting and say, you can't do it that way. You know, I needed to honor those differences. So we came up with a rule that when he starts the discipline, then he finishes and I don't intervene. When I start the discipline, I finish it and he doesn't intervene. And then if I'm like, hey, you wait till your daddy gets home, when I pass that stick to him, he's going to do it his way. So that is an example of a his-her system where I do it my way, he does it his way, and then how it works and crosses over for other people. But now we don't have any conflict over it. Why? Because we've developed a system that worked for us. A conditional system, if X occurs, we will use X. If Y occurs, we will use Y. For example, we have teenagers in our home, lots and lots of teenagers. I feed lots of teenagers, and we give rides to a lot of teenagers. One of my sons doesn't drive yet, and so we just kind of developed a rule where, hey, if it's before 11, I'm going to do the transporting. If it's after 11, Jake's going to do the transporting. And we transport a lot because I love transporting, because you get to hear all the secrets because they don't think that you as an adult have ears. So it's something that's really awesome that we've always done inside of our family. Intimacy and affection. Let's just kind of hit the heart. This is the exciting part about marriage, because it's really the only thing that's different in marriage from other relationships. If you don't have regular intimacy, you're more like living like roommates. And I, of course, as a divorce attorney, hear so many stories. And the reason that intimacy and affection in a regular way is so important is because a lack of it causes divorce. Like that happens before the divorce happens. And so that's something why I always have my eye on it. It's kind of measures the health of your marriage, is how regular your intimacy is and how that connection's going. And so the research shows that intimacy for married couples normally is between 1.5 and 3 times a week. And I always say nobody likes a 0.5. So let's go ahead up and round up to 2. I say, Thursday, Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday, doesn't matter when. But if you have a planner inside your relationship, then I want you to plan some days. And then it doesn't mean Thursday, Sunday. It means spontaneous till Thursday. And if you haven't done it by Thursday, then Thursday. And then Sunday, if you haven't engaged in sexual intimacy by Sunday, then Sunday. But sexual intimacy is what makes marriage unique. It's what makes marriage amazing. And so desiring your spouse and knowing them that you have passion for them is something that I think is really, really important. Now, the low desire spouse, the studies show, control the frequency of intimacy. And so if you are the low desire spouse, then I would ask you to initiate more often. And it's interesting because in the seminars I do, I hear there's one way to pierce a man's heart, and that is being told over and over again, no, I don't want you. No, 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 I don't desire you. No sex, no, because really, for religious men, it's the only outlet they have is their wife. and to not have, when you think about your emotional needs or recreating with other people or giving service, all of those can be done by third parties. Where intimacy, that's the only can happen inside of marriage. And so we want to tell ourselves how much we love it and stay connected and initiate often. Now, the people that hear me speak, and I almost always speak about intimacy just to educate people on the studies and frequency. And if you can't move into that frequency right now, it's okay. Make a goal for 6 months to get there then. But most of the time, what makes it so people can't have regular intimacy is their thought processes about it, that resentment that comes inside their marriage for whatever reason, and then also issues with their childhood. And so we're going to talk a minute how to help with resentment issues, and then if you have abuse that's occurred in your past, working to get that box closed, working with a therapist or whatever you need so that that past doesn't affect your present relationship with your spouse. And so I had to learn how to be playful with my husband and flirt more inside my marriage, which I did so much in our engagement. So that's something that I worked on, and and I do most of the initiating because I'm the low initiation spouse. And so it's something that you can look forward to and have a lot of joy with. And so I want to talk a minute about resentment, because this is where we talk about like that emotional divorce occurs first, and then that resentment leads to that physical divorce of not having regular intimacy, and then eventually the studies show then you go into a real divorce. But resentment definition is a person having upset ongoing feelings towards another person or situation because of real or imagined injustice. It's such a very interesting definition and that's a research-based definition. But it's a person having ongoing feelings. And right, when we talk about that kind of cloak research, it's ongoing negative feelings. And that affects your present. And it's real or imagined. And so that's where kind of those ghost conflicts come in. So some ideas to work through resentment. As you know, I'm an acronym crazy person. So I have SASSY off. So being self-aware and using that RAFT model and knowing that all the thoughts that come into you aren't your own, and deciding what your thoughts are and taking charge of those. Being accountable for your part, using spirituality and repentance and forgiveness, and then minding how you think of it after you've extended forgiveness. Seeing with new eyes. Maybe you talk to a wise person in your life or a counselor that helps you see it in a different way, or maybe your bishop or stake president. Knowing what your part was. Did you speak up? What would you do differently if you went back? And then going through on the off part and organizing it and offering that forgiveness. And then the flashlight is just the idea that resentment and negative emotion hate light. They don't want you to look at it. They just want it to be there, and it's there, but you're not dealing with it. Deal with it. Put it down. Work it through. Find a solution. Work it out of yourself. I love the proverb that talks about the tree and the wind. It's like, how do we stop the wind from shelter the tree from the wind? And the solution is you don't. You allow the wind to go through the tree. And it's the same thing with negative emotion. You don't stop it. You just allow it to go through. You feel it and then be done with it. And I know that there's things that take longer to get over. I'm well aware of that. But set a date and then be done with it. Now, let's just go into communication. I love teaching logicizing. Logicizing is taking an emotional issue and filtering it down to a sentence. And so you're basically changing a forward story to a backward. So a forward story is an inductive story with a beginning, middle, and end. Once upon a time, right? You're telling it, this happened in the middle and they lived happily ever after, right? That's a forward story. A backward story is a deductive process. That's where you say conclusion and then give a few supporting facts. So teaching people that mainly speak in forward stories to do backward stories is really important. I've already taught backward stories people, hey, listen to forward stories or tell forward stories with your spouses. Now I'm going to teach it the other way. So for emotional spouses, look, figure out what you want and just say it. Say it in one sentence. Make it really simple. Don't go back and say, I feel, or when you did that to me, or can we talk about it? Logicize it. You haven't heard of the word logicize because I made it up. But basically an example is husband and wife got in a big argument. The husband storms off, doesn't come to bed. The wife goes to bed crying, but she's a closeness person, but they never took the time to develop a system regarding it. And so she's really sad and she wishes that her husband would come back. So when the next day she logicizes and she says, hey, when I'm upset, come and cuddle me. And you don't need to say anything more. You coming back within 30 minutes is enough for me to know that you're sorry and we're going to work it through. So you can use symbols as you go through things to make things better. So the question really comes is, what happens if they don't do my solution? Well, no big deal. I mean, you're not always going to get your way, but you sometimes will get your way. Just like me and my flowers and my roses, I was logicizing there. You might need to negotiate another solution, or when you do get your solution, celebrate and appreciate. And so when a lot of times people tell me, well, I said, and it's like, man, I get people in a divorce, and some people, why are you divorcing? Well, I have 3 words. I don't know. Wait, what? You don't know? And so sometimes people communicate important things like a comma, and they just kind of do it in passing, or sometimes it's a period. But if it's something that's really important to you, you need to say it in an exclamation point. Tell them, this is a non-negotiable. I have to get a change. I have to. Give people a chance to know on a scale from 0 to 10 how important it is to you. I like to use that 0 to 10 so that it's like, hey, this is a 5 to me, this is an 8, this is a 9, this is a 10, so that it's something that you can work towards. And then the couples communication, or the powwow, is something that I'm crazy about. Our kids call them, we call them. Jake and I do a weekly powwow. And I love what Elder Ballard has said on it, that the Executive Family Council is also a good time for wives and husbands to talk about their personal relationships with each other. When Elder Harold B. Lee performed our sealing, he taught us a principle that I believe all couples will find helpful. He said, never retire without kneeling together, holding hands, and saying your prayers. Such prayers invite Heavenly Father to counsel us by the power of the Spirit. And so having a family council is something just weekly. And hey, it's because as a professional in conflict, what I found is that conflict comes from ideas that are miscommunicated, not communicated, or changed without notice. So if you have expectations and they're not set the right way, that's where conflict comes. So sitting down saying, hey, here's what we're doing Monday through Saturday, here's what you're in charge of, here's what I'm in charge of, and here's the best thing that occurred in our marriage the last week. Getting that constant feedback can really, really help your marriage. You can also use the new goal system that the church has come out with and use those goals and set those together. There's a lot of great things you can do. It doesn't need to be long, just 10 to 15 minutes, but consistency is what we're looking for. And we want you to be able to try to get on the same page, or at least the same book. So having regular communication and scheduling, working on your marriage instead of just in your marriage, is something that can be important. And that kind of bridges us to those spiritual patterns of faith. Now, faith crisis is a cause for divorce, and I've been very prayerful about it. What is it that I could help or train on? And what I've thought about is the idea that if 2 people marry with the same religion, and you wouldn't have married the other person without that same religion, if you married in the temple and that's your goal, and you want to stick to that, then basically you're making a marital commitment, not a faith commitment, a marital commitment, that you guys will attend all of your church meetings together and pray together every night, regardless of your faith, so that it will get you through those faith crises that might come. That marital commitment, I tell my newlyweds, do that as soon as you can. Get that commitment where you guys have said to one another, hey, we have an expectation that we are going to attend our meetings together and pray together our whole marriage through. For the rest of your life, kneel down and pray together nightly and ask God to bless your marriage. Ask God to help with your marriage, because as I said, this is a lifetime pursuit of having a better marriage. Read your scriptures together. Go to church together. Share spiritual insights. When my husband was the bishop, I would rejoice in cold dinners on Sunday because he wasn't home and he was out serving the Lord. And then forgiving and really letting that go, like we've talked about. David O. McKay said, let husbands and wife never speak in loud tones to each other unless the house is on fire. Really just kind of controlling ourselves and using that RAFT to develop a really great marriage. And then we talk about self-reliance or finances. It says, I have discovered that there is no way that you can ever earn more than you can spend. I am convinced that it is not the amount of money an individual earns that brings peace of mind as much as it is having control of the money. President Heber J. Grant once said, if there is any one thing that will bring peace and contentment into the human heart and into the family, it is to live within our means. And if there is any one thing that is grinding and discouraging and disheartening, it is to have debts and obligations that one cannot meet. So pay your debts off as quickly as you can and get out of that bondage. But one thing that might be interesting to note is when we talk about finances inside of that causes divorce, actually being an excessive saver also causes divorce. So excessive spending and excessive saving, where they're, if you have a saver, it doesn't matter. Spender, but when you have a crisscross queue, people can feel controlled by excessive saving on Monday. So, and that money control. So just make sure that you have a balance there and that you're working with your spouse on something that works for both of you. So talk about that in your marital retreats as you go forward. Because remember, you are the author of your own marriage story. Will you make your spouse the hero or the villain? You have that choice. You have that RAFT model. You have that thinking. You have got to control those thoughts that come in. We've got to focus on being proactive and planning things and events and dates and doing things that make our marriage grow. And so that now that you've had this talk, it's a charge for you guys to be good ambassadors for good marriages. Share with other people happy marriage habits. Encourage others to get regular marriage education. Be proactive in your own marriage and influencing other people's marriage. When other people come to you and say, hey, my marriage isn't going, tell them, wait, stop, work on things, because marriage is that shield. Marriage is that long-term protection of happiness. Keep your covenants in your marriage, and it can move you forward. And so as you're being a marriage ambassador, you can shorten kind of what I've talked to you and check in on the paid list. This is what I check in with people that aren't having good marriages. Are you praying together daily? Do you have a weekly powwow? Do you do one purposeful, mindful act a day for your marriage? Do you have regular intimacy 2 to 5 times a week so you don't get that decision fatigue that occurs around intimacy? Like, no, just make a decision on how frequent it's going to be and make it a habit. Do you have your date night weekly? So just check in on these base foundational things first and have them do good on the paid list and then add to it as you go forward. And I told you I would share some of the marriage heartbursts that I share with Jake inside our retreat. So I have a little journal that I keep on my phone. I'll take a picture of it, as you can see, and then I'll write about it so that in our retreats, I can tell him specifically, give him specific feedback about what's going well in our marriage. So some examples just from the last 12 months is we took an art class together. So that's learning a new talent together. We watched the sunset, nature's wonders. We unified. We've had some really tough trials the last 12 months. My son was in a really serious cliff jumping accident, and so we had to connect and unify as we worked through all of the issues with that. We snorkeled holding hands. That's my favorite romantic activity. We do it every year. We've performed marriage seminars together. We play spike ball together now. It's a new outdoor activity that we're working on. I like to have an outdoor activity we do and an indoor activity. We took our 4th child to the temple. It was a proud moment together. And we always watch General Conference in Gunlock, Utah. That's a tradition that we follow. So develop what your traditions are. We plan group dates. We like to build group dates with other people with strong marriages. We want to hang around with them. We want to see what they're doing. And we want to have a co-op with them. We eat dinner at our favorite restaurants. So we plan some dates. Our last 2 sons got their Eagles. We reached some goals as parents. We picked up our son from his mission in Argentina. And it was a really beautiful experience to see him as a missionary in action. And then Jake just started speaking his Spanish, and they were just companions going along. And it was so beautiful. And there was so much heartfelt connection that occurred from that experience that I told Jake, like, wow, I didn't know I could love you this much. We went to go, when after Ashton got home from his mission, we went to go see Star Wars, which was something nostalgic. We love nighttime fires. That's something romantic. We learned to tango. So dancing is part of a happiness formula that we have. We problem solved really tough issues. And we did that by attending the temple together. We've had a lot of homemade dates lately, a lot of them. Homemade blizzard nights. We've gone on walks. We've gone on hikes. We've watched sunsets. Done a lot of homemade fun. One of my favorite ones is we saved up for a hot tub, and we just sit and talk in the hot tub. We actually helped build a soup kitchen in Argentina, so international service. And we do our marital retreats. We had a home MTC for our son, which was something new. We've never done that before. One of our sons got married, which was an awesome family connection. We had Irish twin grandbabies 1 week apart, and so that's been exciting. We got snow cones in Beaver. That's seizing the moment. We weren't planning on it, but we had a snow cone shack in one of our past businesses, so it's something that's fun. At the John Gottman seminar, we learned about an idea of rubber ducky love notes. And that's where we take a rubber ducky, we hide it in our bedroom, and when the other person finds it, then you have to write the note. Sometimes it's been hidden for more than 2 months, and Jake still hasn't found it right now. But it's a way for us to have some fun and also to write those love notes. We go to a jazz game, like that's in our area, and sometimes they have really cheap tickets, so we go every year to one jazz game. We celebrate big events. On big days, on Valentine's and birthdays, we do our marital retreats, so the big events go there. We were a couple for Halloween, Bruce and Dory, so sometimes we have some goofy fun. We've zip-lined, we do high adventure things. I supported Jake and went with him as he got an award in his business, and we make a yearly marital scrapbook. I know this is a lot of ideas, but people tell me, Tamara, I want ideas. What are you and Jake doing? Well, there's 30 things that Jake and I did this last year, and we're growing, and guess what? Next year, I'm going to have 30 new things, because this slide was old, and I went down and I updated it this year of things that we've done this year. So we want to keep things going. It's not something that we do once in a lifetime. And in closing, I just want to let you know that as you map your marriage, as you think about the mercies, the marital virtue, the emotional needs, recreation and dating, conflict resolution, regular intimacy and affection, exchange of communication, self-reliance, and spiritual, as you think about how you can grow those things, you will be able to live your happily ever after, and you will be able to do the work. When you first get married, you have all these dreams and all these goals, and you can accomplish them, but not all at once. Please make it a lifetime of making your marriage better and better as you go. And I'll tell you what, next year at Education Week, my marriage is going to be better than it is today, just like it's better today than it was last year, because we're going to grow and we're going to focus in on that eternal relationship that brings the most joy in your life. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.